And a good Tuesday morning to you. Welcome to your morning cup of cyber. I'm Jim with Cyber-Recon. My Illy coffee's in a Boston cup this morning. As we kick off another day in wonderful Northern Virginia, where I'm broadcasting from. Hope you're having a good day. Hope things are going well. Hope you're staying safe out there. Round robin around cyber news this morning. Not a ton of items that maybe directly impact you. Some things you probably want to be aware of that are going on in the news. We've seen this for a while. Israeli and Iranian tensions continue to rise on the cyber front. As you know, these two countries do not get along based on ideology and religion. Totally two diametrically opposed organizations run these two countries. So obviously they've been at each other's necks for a while. Just this year, cyber attacks continue to go back and forth between the two countries. It looks like those are not going to stop anytime soon. Between January, really it's been April, and June, there's been volleys going back and forth. Someone, which looked like a nation state, attacked Israeli water treatment facilities and tried to increase the chlorine level to the point where it would do one of two things. Either it would poison people with too much chlorine, or it would shut down the systems, which it could easily do because there's sensors that detect the level of chlorine in the water, which essentially would lead to a situation where all the pumps would be shut down and Israel would be denial of service on water. Dangers with SCADA devices, of course, are everywhere. The next volley was an Iranian port was attacked. The SCADA devices in the port shut down the port for a while. It looks like, the first launch, of course, was Iran at Israel. Second launch was Israel back at Iran. A number of things have happened between this. A pumping station in Israel was shut down. A water pumping station was shut down in Israel by some malware. Some websites, Israeli websites, were defaced. Essentially, those were all on one web server. So it's been going back and forth. Western officials are warning that both attacks were relatively harmless, talking about the two major attacks, the attack on the chlorination systems and attack on the port. And all these little skirmishes are obviously in addition to that. But Western officials warned that while both those attacks were relatively harmless, it never stops at that. So there's continuing tensions between these. These are nation-state actors working on the cyber front. I think the port attack has been pretty much assumed by Israel. No one's really claiming 100% that these are sponsored by the nation states, but it's pretty easy to see as this goes back and forth that it's fairly easy to see that these could be possibly state-sponsored or state-sanctioned, at least, attacks across the two countries. So probably more to come as the year unfolds between these two folks, between Israel and Iran. It could get ugly because both have both have good cyber programs. So more to come. We'll be watching for what happens with these actions in the Middle East. Apple's back on. We get Apple. It seems like the return of Apple every week. Something's going on with Apple. Yesterday, Apple released iOS 13.5 for the iPhone, iPad, and iPod Touch devices. Look at the release. ZDNet saying the release is about 77 megabytes big for the Apple iPhone 11 Pro Max. It's probably close to the same for everyone. The release doesn't, according to the article by ZDNet, and again, like I always do, I'll throw these links in the show notes below after the show has aired. According to the ZDNet, there's really no security fixes. There's no improvements to the iOS. It looks like the big thing they did with this update is to stop the Uncover jailbreak. So the Uncover jailbreak, I think it was May 24th, The Uncovered Jailbreak was released May 24th. It's been the first jailbreak to work on Apple devices for a while. It looks like this fix kills that jailbreak. So if you have jailbroke your iPhone, your iPad, whatever, I have not jailbroke anything in a long time, but if you have a system that you've applied this Uncovered Jailbreak to access root functionality in your Apple device, this patch will kill that Uncovered Jailbreak. It will make it so that thing no longer works. It's 13.5.1 is the iOS update for iPhone, iPad, and iPod Touch devices. Really, they're saying it's a security update, but it looks like, according to ZDNet folks, it just fixes that jailbreak. So more to follow, I guess, for that. See if there's anything else in there. The other thing we see is an increased amount of phishing attacks that are using form-based attacks in their profile. This is again, as one side increases, as we increase our phishing awareness, as we increase the knowledge of our user base, as we increase the knowledge we have on our side, on the defensive side, the attackers always continue to get smarter as well. They've realized that now they can host forms in places like Google or Microsoft, and the form will come with an address that's .google.com or Microsoft.com. So what the wily attackers doing is they're creating forms that look for logon credentials. So it's something like Dropbox or something like that, logon credentials. And when they phish you, when you get phished by one of these attacks, the form that's presented is coming from somewhere like Google.com. So it's more likely to get through defensive filtering products. So it's really smart, a smart way to do things. So again, make sure the folks know that this is going on. It's increased, especially on spear phishing, it's increased quite a bit. And sometimes they'll use this form to actually get access tokens. So it'll look like a form that looks like an application that you legitimately are using is asking for access tokens to some of your other applications, and once they're granted, it's easy for the attacker to continue to use those. It's not getting user IDs and passwords. It's not getting those types of credentials. It's getting an access token, so it can just access your applications when it wants. Barracuda is the one that's really tracking this. It looks like these types of attacks are about 4% of spear phishing attacks, approximately 100,000 cases in the first quarter of 2020. That just shows you the scale of this. So 4% of just spear phishing attacks is about 100,000 cases. Google's being leveraged about 65% of the time, Microsoft about 13% of the time, excuse me. Formcraft's about 2%, MailChimp's about 4%, and SendGrid is about 10%. So we're seeing attackers getting wily. Read more about this on the link, the article. And then there's some additional information that I'll provide from Barracuda Networks, folks that did this initial survey to give you a little more information on how this form-based attack works. Basically, though, what you need to know is they're using a form that's being hosted by a reputable site, Google or Microsoft. When you complete the form, you're being redirected or directing information to a phishing site or a malware site. So again, more we have to train our users on, more we have to be aware of. It's just the bad guy increasing knowledge. We increase our defensive capabilities. They increase their knowledge. Use our own things against us many times. Those you need to know, the weird holiday of the day. This is National Rocky Road Day. Again, most of these weird holidays, the website that I'm using can't find the originator. I'm going to guess that National Rocky Road Day was created by some ice cream vendor, somebody that makes ice cream. but it's, eat ice cream, eat Rocky Road ice cream today. It's National Rocky Road Day. Enjoy that. The other big news from our site, from Cyber-Recon to you, Trivia Night is coming up. Not tomorrow, but the following Wednesday. We're moving it to Wednesday. Now that folks are getting out, they're getting a little more liberties from relief from the COVID-19 lockdown. Friday's not a good night to do it because people are out doing things on Friday now. So we're moving it to Wednesday night, midweek. Wednesday night will be Trivia Night, June 10th. Come out, show your security chops. Do you know the security? What's your security knowledge? What's your knowledge level in the security world? Trivia Night can be a place you can come out and maybe unseat Mike Bravo. He's been last two Trivia Nights, the last two sessions we've had, Mike Bravo's won everything. The first round, the 2 sessions ago, he took the overall. That's the overall prize we had. The last one we had, we introduced another prize midway through. Mike Bravo had that one sewn up as well. And by the end of the day, Mike Bravo had the whole show. He is the reigning trivia king in cyber trivia. Can you unseat Mike Bravo? I guess that should be maybe the new name of the night is not Trivia Night. It's Unseat Mike Bravo Night. Can you knock Mike Bravo off his pedestal? Who knows? It may be possible. I don't know. But it's up to you to show up. There's no charge for this. No charge for Trivia Night. We use an app that you can use. It uses on your mobile phone. We don't ask for any personal information at all. When you log in, you'll use a login name that is Cyber-Recon. That gets you to the right room. And then you create your own name within the guidelines and the rules. Find out more information at cyber-recon.com/trivia. Of course, I'll throw that link in the show notes. Love to hear what you think. What you think about if you've hung out for any of the trivia nights or if you watched them on the playback. I'll throw a link up there. I'll throw a link up there to one of the trivia nights. You can look at it. They're a pretty good time. They're a good time. There's some questions that usually stump some folks, and there's some softballs out there as well. We don't want folks to not get any questions right. So test your trivia knowledge. Do you know what's going on? What's going on in trivia? Last time we did movies. This time we'll get back to pictures, images in this one, as well as the normal trivia questions. So as always, like, subscribe. Once you subscribe, hit the bell to be notified when new content's coming out. Comment, share with your folks. We'd love to get this going. We'd love a big showing on Trivia Night. We had half a dozen folks or so last time. The more that play, the more fun it is. It's actually a pretty good time, and it lasts about an hour, no cost at all. Love to see you out there. It'll be a fun time. So, anyways, after the break, we're going to talk about switches. What do you know about switches? Do you have your switch terminology down? The big thing is, do you know what a switch does as opposed to a router? And do you know the benefits of a switch over a hub? Stuff security folks got to know. How do they prevent against stuff like loops? And how do they protect against floods? Are important things in the cyber world. So hang around. We'll be right back. We'll jump into the slide deck talking about switches and how they can help your cyber career progress. So hang out. We'll be right back. And we are, like I promised, we are right back. So thanks for staying with us. I'm Jim with Cyber-Recon. Welcome to another episode of preparation for increasing your security knowledge and preparing you for the Security Plus certification exam. This morning we will be looking at Domain 2, technologies and tools, more particularly the switches that we use in our networking and our network protection. So, overview what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about what is a switch, what's port security, talk about the difference between layer 2 and layer 3. It's important to know the difference between those, know why we use a switch versus a router, how switches help with loop prevention, and flood guarding. It's kind of the rundown of what we are going to be talking about this morning. So, as always, if we can find a NIST definition, we're going to find a NIST definition. A network device that filters and forwards packets between LAN segments. I bet I'll say that again. A switch is a network device that filters and forwards packets between LAN segments. That's what NIST says it is. We've seen these. We got these all over the place. These are the devices that make up most Ethernet networks. They forward frames based on MAC addresses. And if we think back to what we talked about yesterday with routers, what we talked about with routers is a router routes packets based on IP addresses. And the big terminology, a router uses IP packets and layer 3. A switch uses frames and layer 2. So we're using MAC addresses, and every device has what should be a unique MAC address that by definition should not be changed. It's burned into the device. Obviously, virtual devices get a MAC address as well, not burned into a physical device, but created when that networking interface is created. They work using address resolution protocol, defining each switch builds an ARP table and defines what systems are attached to each individual port. They operate at layer 2. Again, that's important to stress. Switches are layer 2, routers are layer 3. They limit the traffic that can be seen as opposed to a hub. When we talk about hubs, if you have a 4-port hub, that traffic, when it hits the hub, it's going to go out every port. It acts as a repeater. It just repeats the traffic across all ports, which can create huge collision domains. A switch is smarter. When the traffic arrives at the switch, it is sent only to the port that the frame is destined to go to. So that means that there's a limit on what can be seen because not all of the ports are rebroadcasting the traffic. And on a small port, like 4-port switch, that's not so bad. But if you think of a huge 24 or 48 port switch, that one frame hits that switch and then it goes out to 48 different ports. Can cause a huge amount of traffic. And more importantly for the security folks, that traffic, anyone that spans that or puts something in to be able to tap in and watch that traffic, regardless of where they plug in on the port or on the hub, they're going to get the traffic. It just gets rebroadcast to everyone. A switch doesn't do that. It only goes out to that specific single port it is destined to go to. So you'd have to be able to tap into that one port that traffic is going to. We again, like routers, we do administer these through SNMP or Simple Network Management Protocol. Please use version 3. And if you're using Telnet, please use SSH or Secure Shell. It's important to make sure we have that. Like routers, physically secure these devices because they can be, if you can physically access them, they can be physically attacked. Use multi-factor authentication and complex passwords. Change those default credentials. We should say that in every single device we talk about. First thing you should do is change the default credentials. If you can change the username, change that. Definitely change the password. And then disable unsecure protocol. So if you have Telnet without SSH, get rid of it. You shouldn't be using that. Definitely not a good process. Switches can also allow us to use port security. And this means that the biggest thing is not everyone can just plug into the switch and get on the network. And this, we think about plugging in a switch. You don't have to physically plug into a switch to be protected by port security. This could be a switch that is in a conference room, right? The drop or the plug-in is on the wall of the conference room, and that cable goes back to a switch. If anybody plugs into that wall, in some networks, you can be automatically connected to the corporate network, and we want to stop that. So we can filter based on MAC address filtering. This is a layer of protection, but it obviously can be spoofed fairly easily because we can change our MAC address. If we know a legitimate address on the network, we can change our MAC address to that network address, and then we can get on the network. So MAC addressing is a layer of protection. Know that it is a layer of protection, but it's not very strong. We have ports that can do static learning on this port security, which means a specific address can be assigned to each port. So if you're not that MAC address, you can't get on the port. You can't get onto the network. Obviously, again, this is vulnerable to MAC spoofing. Dynamic learning, that's where the switch itself learns the MAC addresses that should be on each port, and this can allow multiple devices to be plugged into a single port, either over time or with another device, maybe a hub plugged into a switch port. It does provide, again, a layer of protection. The learning period has to be set by the administrator to ensure that we just don't learn another bad address coming in. And then sticky learning, dynamic, it's like dynamic but retains information through reboots. Every time you shut off, if you reboot a dynamic port, it's going to learn ports again. It gives the attacker, if they have physical access, they can unplug or power cycle the switch, and they would be able to get onto it. And that's just a way they circumvent the security of that port security. So sticky learning, when the switch reboots, it just knows the correct addresses that should be on there. Again, MAC addresses, again, remember that. I think we talked about this plenty as we've been going along. Layer 2 operated the data link layer, or the layer 2 of the OSI model. And I'll throw a link up there for the OSI model, because we talked about that a month or so ago. Layer 3 operate at the network layer, and that's where our routers are at. There are some layer 2/layer 3 switches now, which operate kind of as a switch and a router in one device. And we see that especially in things like access points and small office, home office devices that have to be multifunctional. So we do see that, but do typically know that layer 2 is generally going to be your switches. Layer 3 is going to be your routers. Layer 2 operates on frames. Layer 3 operates on IP addresses and IP packets. So that's our biggest difference between those two. You just need to know that. Switches operate at layer 2, and because of that, there's no time to live counter like there is on IP addresses. And if we get into a loop, the packets can continue to loop and will not stop. So there's loop prevention we built into these things. That's a separate talk we're going to have. We'll have that this week. We got to talk about loop prevention and how spanning tree protocol, or STP, is used to stop loops by building multiple redundant paths, but it puts stops in loops. It puts some blocks in place. Loops are unique, and they're caused because of the way redundant switching works. When we set up multiple switches in redundant paths, which is what we want to do for our recoverability and continuity of operations, that kind of things. We want to have multiple paths between machines, so we want multiple switches. We have to make sure we don't create loops as well. So we'll talk about loop prevention and STP in another video, because it is a little bit bigger, so we want to definitely cover that. But know that switches do prevent looping if we use STP. Switches can also prevent flood attacks, and these things like ping floods, synchronization floods, ICMP, or the old Smurf flood. And this is managed by dropping connections. Flood guards monitor the traffic rate based on the percentage of capability that switch can offer, and if it gets to a certain point, it'll start dropping packets to prevent a flood. Floods have typically been used by attackers to overwhelm a switch, and generally when a switch gets overwhelmed, it starts to function as a hub. So if an attacker can overwhelm a switch and get it to act like a hub, then maybe that attacker happens to be plugged into one of the open ports on the switch, and then it's going to start, that attacker would be able to read all of the traffic going to the port, to the hub or switch. And then the attacker would be able to read all of the traffic going to the switch because it's acting like a hub. It feels like a Monday sometimes. So that's the rundown. That's what you need to know about switches. That's what you need to know, the difference between switches and hubs, and difference between switches and routers. So there's two different, it kind of sits in between. It's definitely needed in networking. This is, again, the device that makes up the majority of your Ethernet LAN networks. It's generally if someone gets inside your network. Their attack is going to be based on, if it's a network attack, it's going to be based on attacking switches. Generally, and these are general statements, if someone's coming from the outside of your network, the first thing they're going to do is attack one of the devices like a firewall, obviously, or a router. To get inside, start moving forward. So do know about switches, do know about your OSI model. Again, I'll link that. Glad you hung out with me this morning. Thanks for being here. Hopefully you have a good day ahead of you. And hey, again, share with your friends if you can. Like, comment, subscribe. Hit the bell to be notified, because we would love to have you here hanging out with us in the morning. So as always, I'm Jim with Cyber-Recon. Be safe out there.